Welcome HMT to our students. This is your video lecture on the introduction to catering. So let's get started. What is actually catering? So catering is a way that we provide a service to our customers that is a little bit different in food service and experience than per se what some restaurants or traditional restaurants or hotels actually can do. So now, while some restaurants and some hotels offer catering of their own and they have catering departments, that's essentially what you will be learning in this class, is that aspect of food service industry. So essentially, what we do is we respond to a specific need within social and business circles that have a need. And a lot of times that need is not satisfied by a set menu or a specific area or even, a place or a location. A lot of times that need changes based on where the guests or the customers would like to have their event take place. Sometimes that might be on a beach, sometimes that might be on a field, sometimes that might be in a location of their dreams, whatever it may be, if that's a building or a tent or whatever that might be. And then it is our job to make it possible with actually doing things that they desire. We actually deal with a lot of different customers, but mostly they fall into two categories. We either deal with individuals, or what in the industry we call B2C. B2C means business to customer. And we also deal with other businesses. So we also deal with, and that's called B2B, that's business to business. And those are two types of markets that we essentially see as somebody having a challenge that they need fixed by something like a catering company. So obviously the individuals we're talking about a lot of social events such as weddings or bar and bat mitzvahs, anniversaries, family reunions, whatever that may be. And then business to business is when we actually do businesses with conference centers and convention centers where they might have already other events going on. They just need us to come in and maybe do the food service or do some sort of entertainment or decor or whatever that may be. So those are all different things that we potentially need to do. Now, there are very big challenges in catering. So unlike an actual hotel or a restaurant where repeat customers is what we try to have, yes, we also try to have repeat customers, which is much easier in business to business. Let's say you become a caterer for a law company and you cater their lunch every single day for a year or every single Wednesday for a year, whatever it is. That's a repeat customer, and we would love to have that. That's fantastic. But most of the food service, most of the services that we provide, especially when it comes into the social circles, are actually one time, right? So, I mean, maybe there are people that want to get married multiple times. I don't know if that's on somebody's to-do list in this class, but for the most part, right, we make it very special. And most people envision getting married one time. Maybe they do it more times. That's fine too. We'll take repeat business in that sense. Or it might be somebody is turning, 13, like I mentioned before, the bar and bat mitzvahs. It's a big party that somebody has, when they turn 13. That's not a repeat thing. Now, it could be repeat if there are siblings involved and they're very happy with our services. So then maybe that could be a repeat business. But obviously, that's something a little bit different. So our repeat business typically comes from the guests and the customers that attend our events. So we want to blow them out of the water to say, wow, this was such an amazing event, such an amazing wedding. Can you do mine or my daughter's or my sons or whatever it may be? It's just a great way to kind of sell our product. So that's why doing a great job is so important, right? So when we look at catering, I like to define it as an art and as a science. Now, the reason that it's both an art and a science is that the art aspect is the creativity of it. So designing the menu and catering literally to somebody's needs and desires, what they really, really want, blowing them out of the water, right? And then the other thing is the science. While we want to do that, we also need to make sure that we understand exactly how do we make money off of something that we're, just throwing this wild party doing, yes, we'll do whatever you want. We need to make it seem like it's that way, but there has to be really, really, really strict guidelines that we follow as far as how much money are we willing to spend to put on this event for X amount of dollars that we're going to charge the client. So we literally need to understand how to price everything perfectly before we say yes to an actual business, right? It's like, oh, can you cater my party for $1,000? It's kind of like, well, I don't know. Can I cater your party for $1,000? How many people? What type of food do you want? Because a lot of times brand new caterers, they don't take into consideration. They think, oh yeah, I can purchase food and make food for, I don't know, 50 people for $1,000. It's not an issue. That's perfectly fine. What they forget to do is they forget to, number one, pay themselves. Number two, make sure that it's worth their time. And number three, make sure that they actually make money and it covers all of their other costs, costs of maybe driving to the grocery store, of spending time prepping, of maybe hiring other people to help, right? So we need to make sure that all of that is covered in a business. When we talk about catering, there's other challenges that we encounter. And really, when we look at it, a lot of it is what, when, where, and who, a little bit of how too, right? Because most of our catering, or a lot of the catering, like what we will be doing in this class, is what we refer to as off-premise catering. And that's where we actually take our services to another location, right? And there's a lot that has to do with it. The food production aspect is actually very, very small. It's the planning and the marketing and all the rest of the stuff that actually takes up majority of the time, because really prepping the food, and I always say this when people are, even with our presidential dinner that we are planning, for the most part, I say that's the easiest part, is actually the part where we cook and make the food. It's everything else that goes into the planning that's quite challenging. Now, COVID-19 definitely changed this a little bit for us. It made it a little bit more challenging. It's easing up quite a lot now. But COVID-19 really kind of changed catering for us a lot. There were a lot more safety and sanitation practices that had to come into play. Things that might still have to be followed today, and also practices and policies change from location to location, sometimes from county to county, from city to city. So it definitely brought an extra challenge for all of us. And I always like to look at, caterers, we have to really anticipate anything and really the worst happening. And that's what I always tell, my staff, and I tell my students when we're doing an event, is you essentially have to pretend, or have to have a plan B or C or D or whatever it is, for everything that can happen, because whatever can happen will happen, right? So if there's an elevator, you have a plan on what you're going to do if that elevator breaks down. Those are all challenges that we just have to kind of make do with, right? If something was planning on being served, hot, maybe you sell it as room temperature if it needs to be, if it's still safe to be served, right? So all of those things. So you have to understand how you actually handle your emotion as a caterer, and that's a huge part of being able to be in this business. I'm sure you guys have heard it, you have to keep your cool. You cannot let them sweat. And you have to have enough ability to pivot and turn and change to where, although something wasn't planned, the guest or the customer will never know, because you have to sell it in a way that they essentially are still wowed. And if you believe it, and if you say this is how it was meant to be, most of the time they won't know the difference if you do it well. So catering segments that we deal with. Now in this class, we will not be doing social events, as far as people's social events. These are incredibly hard to do. Most people that I hear, they're like, I want to be a wedding planner. And I'm like, that's great. But that is a huge, huge, huge responsibility, because think about it. Somebody's putting you in charge of possibly what a lot of people consider the most important, or the most, kind of this like glamorous, or some of the best, most fun day of their life, right? It's like, what if you do something wrong and then that tarnishes that such important day? So before anybody gets into social catering, you really have to make sure that you understand what you're doing. And also, there's gonna be a lot of hand holding. There's a lot of people that don't realize that, but when somebody's planning the best day of their life, they have a lot of opinions and they have a lot of expectations. So that's definitely something that we have to look at. With the social and small groups, we've seen a lot of changes. A lot of people are kind of gravitating to these micro weddings, or having a minimony, which means like a small ceremony and then having a bigger party later. There's definitely a lot of changes that we've seen. Big parties are of course happening as well, but because everybody's kind of backed up with these events, we're kind of seeing even some smaller things happening. People are having weddings on Mondays because they'll get a discount, right? So a lot of different things are happening as a result of kind of the COVID pandemic. Corporate catering has changed as well as a result of the pandemic, mostly because what we've seen is that we actually have done Zoom and some virtual events really, really well. So a lot of people and a lot of companies are saying, you know what, maybe this is something we can incorporate into the future. So we're doing a lot of hybrid events and things like that. But definitely this business is back. We know that there is something that is absolutely hugely, hugely lucrative for caterers, and we weren't excited when it went away. There are, lower ends that we can do as far as catering, maybe some low level, as far as what we can do. It's not as doesn't take as much time and whatever it is, something like drop off breakfast or lunch or something like that. Then there's some medium stuff where there's a little bit more creativity. And then we also still are doing some high end special events that kind of have to do with corporate catering. In my eyes, is definitely way less hand holding. Typically you have a set budget, you know exactly what you're working with, not many changes, not many people, in the business making decisions. Usually you're dealing with a planner from the company, and you have a lot of room per se to be creative and to kind of do what you actually think. So kind of going on social, once again, this is a very fun part. What a lot of people think is that's the reason they get into catering. Remember that this is a huge mix of emotions, responsibility. You do this well, you're amazing. You do this not as well, and you will never book business again. Because if you get a bride angry, or a mother of the bride, or a groom, or a mother of the groom, or a father of the groom, or whatever it is, or whoever's involved in the party, and you ruin that special day, this is something that people don't forget. So be really careful before you start becoming a social caterer if that's something that is in your wheelhouse. Institutional catering, that's once again kind of similar to what we're going to be doing a lot in this class. That has to do with dealing with government, academic institutions, exactly how we're going to be doing the presidential lunch. That's exactly what we're doing. Typically, these are a little bit higher end business. This is something where caterers do get to play a little bit. And also, it definitely is where it's fairly lucrative. Like, just like with our presidential luncheon, we know exactly that what our budget's going to be, what the college is willing to pay. And sometimes they will even let you know, we might be even willing to pay a little bit extra if there are great ideas or whatever, something that we want to do. These are interesting. There are typically 3 areas that we fall into as far as caterers. A lot of caterers consider themselves either medium or high-end caterers. We don't really like to be, or please don't ever try to be, a low-end caterer, because then you're competing with somebody like Chick-fil-A or Wegmans or even Whole Foods. And honestly, a low-end caterer cannot compete with that. There's absolutely no way that you can compete, because of the buying power they have with their vendors and the amount of money that they can sell their products for. You absolutely cannot compete with them. There is on-premise and off-premise catering. We will be literally focusing on the off-premise, and also we're going to be focusing on the mobile catering aspect and learning more about that because of our food truck. They're becoming super popular in both institutional and catering and social events. On-premise catering is a little bit different because that happens typically in and within locations. We don't really have a catering space. I guess one of the on-premise catering spaces, but it's still going to be off-premise for us, is when we are doing the Alpha Beta Gamma honors dinner. Still won't be our location. We still have to kind of, it's going to be close to our kitchen, but not necessarily. So it'd still be a challenge. Off-premise catering is essentially what we do, and what we're trying not to do is set ourselves apart from these, low-end caterers who essentially can pump things out, but it's coming from a grocery store. So we're trying to be a little bit more high-end than that. So that's essentially our emphasis on this course. That's what we're going to be doing, and that's what you're going to be learning. So we are going to be forming our own catering company. One of your homework assignments is to think of a logo and a name for our catering company. So that's going to be our class. We are the company. So think of something creative, a logo, and we're going to create a little business card for what our catering company is going to be for the semester. So I look forward to seeing your ideas, and hopefully we're going to pick a good one.